So we are on DAF Tzadi Amud Aleph at the Mishnah. We went yesterday. We went a little bit further. So we're up on DAF Tzadi. The Mishnah says, and of course we're dealing with the minimal shiurim that are required in order for a person to be liable for the malacha of hotzah, for carrying on Shabbos. Normally, when it comes to food items, you need to carry the size of a grogeres, the size of a dried fig, in order to be liable. But there are exceptions when there is a designation of chashivus, of greater importance to the item in question. So that's really what these Mishnayos are all about. So the Mishnah says, Palpelish kolshu, that if you have a peppercorn, Rashi apparently had a different kind of pepper in his days. He says it's a different kind of pepper. Sounds to me like it's a peppercorn, those black peppercorns that we use, but I'm not 100% sure. The itron kolshu, or a small amount of, so even a small amount of peppercorn, or a small amount of tar. We'll see what that's used for shortly. In both of those cases, all you need is a kolshu, a small and minimal amount, in order to be liable. Mine bisamim mine matches kol shehein, that if you have even small amounts of incense, which are used to provide a fragrant odor, or if you have a small amount of metal, we'll see what that's used for, a minimal amount is needed in order to make you liable. You don't need to have a larger shear. And Rashi says when it comes to besamim, people use that to create a nice fragrance, so even a small amount is sufficient to create that fragrance, and therefore you're going to be liable. When it comes to metal, you could use even a small amount of metal to make a little prod to use as an animal stick, a stick to be able to prod an animal. Now the next topic that the Mishnah undertakes is things that have kedusha. And because they have kedusha, you're going to want to put them into geniza, you're going to want to put them into shemus, and therefore they have an inherent chashivus, an inherent importance that makes even a small amount liable for carrying. And the examples that are given in the Mishnah are me'avnei hamizbeach, the stones of the altar, ume'afar hamizbeach, and the earth of the altar, mekak sfarim umekak mitzvah kolshu. And if you have the worm pulp of scrolls, sfarim or scrolls or books. Now, what do we mean by this? Worms typically chew through parchment, and they leave over a residue of worm pulp. And if a person were to carry even a small amount of that, since this worm pulp is from Holy Scripture, you're going to want to put it into shemus, and therefore even carrying a small amount is going to make you liable. And the same thing is true with mantalach, with covers for Sifrei Torah and the like. If a worm chews through that, it has kedusha, so it has chashivas, and therefore you're going to be liable even for a small amount. Shematzniyan osin lagos, and that's what the Mishnah says. Since you put it into geniza, that's what gives it its chashivas. Rabbi Yehuda Omer af hamosi mishamshei avodah zara kolshu. Rabbi Yehuda says not only do holy things have an inherent chashivas, but even accoutrements to avodah zara, to idolatry, have inherent importance, and it's based on what the Torah says. Shenemar v'lo yidbak biyodcha me'uma min acherim, because the Torah says that you may not, when taking spoils of war in the Canaanite wars and entering into Eretz Yisrael, you may not hold on to even a small amount of idolatry items. So therefore the Torah, in identifying even minimal small things having to do with idolatry as being forbidden, shows us that even small amounts of idolatry items are chashuv, have this inherent importance, and therefore carrying them would make you liable on Shabbos.
Why does the Mishnah have to go and tell us that the reason for the chashivas of kedushas the reason is because you put it in use? Why did it say it has especially because it has kedusha?
Because the kedusha, it's a good question. The kedusha itself is not enough of the chashivas. It's the fact that since I need to carry it in order to put it away somewhere, in order to put it into shemus. That's what gives it its inherent chashivas. There could be certain things that, let's say, tashmishay mitzvah, things that were used for a mitzvah that don't have to be put into geniza, and therefore I'm not going to be liable. Let's say I have a piece of a lulav that I used on Sukkot. Right? Carrying that will not make me liable on Shabbos because it's not something that I have to put into Geniza.
Maybe what they're saying is that if it's got, I guess it's not the.
The bottom line is that anything that I need to carry, that I consciously want to get from place A to place B, is something that has chashivas, and therefore I'm liable for carrying it. That's the point of the mission. Gemara, palpeles kol shehu l'may chazia. Why is a peppercorn even a small amount? What are you going to use it for? Why does it have chashivas? The Gemara says l'reach hapeh. Before Tic Tacs were kosher, they used these as breath mints, and therefore you would hold it in your mouth, and that's why it has chashivas. Itron kol shehu, a tar, small amount, l'may chazia l'tzilchasa. What are you going to use that for? So Rashi says that the term tzilchasa means a headache in half the head. I believe what Rashi means to say is that it's an isolated, like a migraine, where the pain radiates from an isolated part of the head, and apparently you'd use tar to alleviate that headache. It's not clear from Rashi what you do with the tar. Do you ingest it? Do you put it on the head? I have no idea. I asked the guys this morning. They also didn't know how you use this as a remedy. Mine besamim kol shehein, incense, even a small amount. Tana rabbanan hamotzi reach ra kol shehu. The Brisa continues in elaborating this idea. If a person were to carry, in the old days we used to call them stink bombs. When you were a kid and you wanted to wreak havoc, you'd use a stink bomb. So they had in the Gemara they had stink bombs where they would create foul odor from different kinds of herbs, and the reason they would do it would be to drive away demonic forces. So carrying even a small amount of that is also going to make you liable on Shabbos. Shemen Tov Kol Shehu, carrying even a small amount of fragrant oil is the same principle, even a small amount, because it has chashivas. And Argaman Kol Shehu. Argaman is crimson. It's the dye that is used to make crimson wool. And Rashi says initially, he says, I don't really know what this has to do with anything, but he says, it would seem to me that this also can be used to create a fragrance, and therefore it's even a small amount. Ubesulas havered echas. And finally, another thing that creates fragrance is a young budding rose, and you need to have one flower in order to be liable, because that's what you need in order to create the same kind of fragrance. At least that's one explanation. Mine matchas kol shein, different kinds of metals. All you need is a minimal amount. Lamai chazu. Again, what is the minimal amount of metal usable for? So Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, shekain roi lasus mimena darvan katan. You can use even a small amount of metal to make an animal prod, and therefore it has use, and therefore it has chashivas. Tana Rabbanan haomer harelai barza. There was a brisa that says that if a person makes a pledge to give a gift to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Berek Habayis, to the treasury, and he says, I hereby pledge iron. So acherim omrim lo yivchos me'ama al ama. So a group of rabbis say that you should not give less. Your minimal obligation is a plate of iron that is 1 square amma in size. The Gemara says, L'may chazia, what can that be used for? So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Yoseph l'kilya orev. We have this even today when you want to make sure that birds don't come to perch on a rooftop. You stick iron nails to be able to prevent them from perching. And this was done in the Beis Hamikdash as well. They would create these crow chasers to prevent the crows from perching on the walls of the Beis Hamikdash, and that's what they would use iron for. And so there would be small pieces or nails of iron, and that's what a person's minimal obligation would provide. V'ika da amri, others learn that the conversation went as follows: that acherim ormim lo yivchos mikilya oriv, that when you make a pledge of iron, you have to give at least minimally enough to be able to create this crow chaser. The kama, and how much is that? Amar Rav Yosef, amal amma, it's a plate of iron that's 1 amma square. Next part of the Mishnah says, Nechoshes, if a person pledges to give copper to the temple, what's the minimal amount he has to give? Lo yivchos mima'ah kasef, he has to give at least the amount of copper that can be purchased with 1 silver ma'ah. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Omer lo yivchos mitzinor ketana shel nechoshes. And Rabbi Eliezer has a more liberal view, and he says you have to give enough copper to be able to create a small little copper fork. And lamai chazia, what can that be used for? So Amar Rabbi shemechatatin bas apsilos umekan chananeros. It was used to actually refine and clean out the candelabrum. What you would use is you would use this fork to either clip or clean the wick, so that the fire would burn better from the wick, and you'd clean out the cups, the receptacles that contain the oil. Okay, let's go on. Mekak sfarim umekak mitfachas. If you have the worm pulp from scrolls or from fabric covers. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda now is providing us with a dictionary, a glossary essentially. He's basically saying that worm pulp, depending upon what the worms ingest and chew on, has different words that are used to describe the kind of worm pulp. So, mekak de sifri, that if the word mekak, mem kuf kuf, is used to describe the worm pulp that worms produce from chewing on parchment. Techach de shiroi, the word techach is the word that describes the worm pulp that comes when the worms chew on fabric, or rather silk. And ve'ila de invi, the word ila is the kind of worm pulp that you get when worms chew on grapes. Upa, or peh, I'm not sure how to pronounce this word. Hey, they pronounce it peh. Peh is the worm pulp that you get when worms chew on figs. The hay, and the word hay refers to rimoni, is the worm pulp that is produced from worms chewing on pomegranates. Hulu sakanta, and the Gemara wants to make a point of letting us know that if you ingest any of these things, any of the worm pulp, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to your health. And that should be probably self-evident, but we give a story to illustrate that. Hahu Talmida Dava Yoseph Kamed Rabbi Yochanan Avakachil Te'eni. There was once a student sitting in front of Rabbi Yochanan who was eating figs. Amarle Rebbe Kutzin Yesh B'Teinim. He said, Rebbe, it feels like there are thorns in these figs, because what was happening is as he was swallowing the figs, he was swallowing some worm pulp and probably worms as well that were embedded in the figs. They didn't check them properly, and the worms felt like they were prickly pins that were scraping against his neck, against his throat. Amarle katle paladain, and he says it's the pa, the worm pulp called peh or peh, that is killing this, that is causing all of this, causing this killing, that is killing him because the guy was feeling asphyxiated. Okay. I don't think Rabbi Yochanan was offering him a remedy. He was just saying, have a nice day. I mean, I don't know what, he was just basically telling him you're haktatsaris because you were ingesting this worm pulp. Okay. Masnisen. Let's go on to the next Mishnah. Hamotzi kupas harochlin afal pi sheyesh ba minim harbe eno chayev elachatas echas. The point of our Mishnah here is to tell me that sometimes you could be carrying a multi-compartment item, but since it's encased in one larger container, you're only carrying one item, and therefore you're only chayiv one time. And the example that is given is called the kupas harochlin. A traveling peddler would typically have, he'd be like a traveling five and dime. So he'd have a whole bunch of different things in smaller containers, but he'd carry them in a larger outer container, in a suitcase, right? And as a result, since they're all contained within one container, even though you're carrying multiple packages, you're only chayav for one malacha. And zirone gina pachos mikrogeres, that when it comes to seeds, even though a seed is a food item, but since it's been designated by the owner to plant it, it does not have to have the size of a dried fig in order for you to be chayiv. What that shear is now going to be the subject of discussion. How many seeds? So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer Chamisha. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says that you need 5 seeds because that's what people will typically carry when they intend to plant seeds. You're not going to bother for less than 5 seeds. Zera kishu and shnaim, but when it comes to kishuin, which is a certain kind of gourd, well, they translate it as a squash or a pumpkin, then all you need is a minimum of 2 because they have a greater chashivas than regular seeds. And zera diluin, which they also translate as either a pumpkin or a squash, also you only need 2. Zera pula mitzri shnaim, and the Egyptian bean seed also only needs a minimum of 2. Hamotzi chagav chai tahor kol shehu, if a person carries a living grasshopper that is of a kosher species, because there are some grasshoppers that are kosher, so you don't need, even though it's a food item, but since it's used for other purposes, we're going to see momentarily that people use living grasshoppers as pets for their kids. Dad will bring home a pet, and you'll bring it home to your child, and he'll give it a name. He'll call it Tommy the grasshopper, and he'll play with it. And since Jiminy Cricket, right? So since it has a use other than food, it has that chashivas. It doesn't have to have the shear of a grogeris. Mace, however, you bring home a dead grasshopper and you want to carry it outside, so then the shear is a grogeris because now it's a food item once again. Tzipores kromim, this certain kind of creature, which, as we'll see momentarily from the Gemara, is one of the kosher species of grasshoppers. Bein mesa kolshu, then it makes no difference whether it's living or dead. You don't need the regular normal food shear. All you need is a minimal amount, and the reason is shematzniyan osel refuah, because it's used for medicinal purposes, and since it's used for medicinal purposes, it has more chashivas than a regular food. Rabbi Yehuda Omer afa motzi chagav chaytomi kolshu shematzniyan osel lekatan lischag bo. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with the Tanakama. The Tanakama holds that only a living grasshopper that's of a kosher species, the shear is chashuv. It's a chashuv item, and therefore the shear is a kolshu. Rabbi Yehuda says even if it's a living grasshopper of a non-kosher species, you'll also bring that home to your child to play with, and therefore that too, as long as it's living, you'll be chayiv even for the shear of a kolshu, even with the smallest amount. Why the Tanakama holds that it's dafka got to be a kosher grasshopper, the Gemara will discuss momentarily. Let's take a look now at the Gemara, or a minhi. We're talking about planting seeds, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira had said you need to plant at least a minimum of 5 seeds in order for it to have chashivas. So the challenge to that is the Brisa says Zevel v'chol hadak k'dei lazavel kelach shel kruv devar Rabbi Akiva, that how much fertilizer and soft sand do you have to carry? These were used to cultivate plants. All you need is enough in order to add to one stalk of a cabbage. Now that implies that even just one seed that's growing has chashivas, because these things are carried even if it's just enough to help one plant. So you see that one seed is enough to have chashivas. Why do you need to have 5 seeds like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says? The Chachamim say that all you need is enough to fertilize a cress plant. But the point is that here you see from this brisa that one plant, not multiple seeds that will eventually grow to plants have chashivas. So why is that? The answer is that it depends if it's before the planting or after the planting. Once something is planted and it takes root, then even one has chashivas. But before you plant the seeds, you're not going to carry one seed to take it out to the garden to plant it. That doesn't have chashivas. The minimum you're going to take out when it comes to typical seeds is you're going to take out 5 seeds. You're not going to take out less than 5 seeds to schlep out to the garden to plant. And therefore, if you're carrying less than 5 seeds, it's not considered to be chashuvah seeds for planting, and therefore you're not liable for the malacha. Next, zera kishuin. The seeds of the kishuin, one kind of gourd. By the way, how do the article translate kishuin? Cucumber. Okay. So Tana Rabbanan, that's right, Esa Kishuim, remember the cucumber. So Tana Rabbanan, Hamotzi Gar'inim, if a person, the Brisa says, carries pits, and here we're specifically talking about date pits. Carrying date pits on Shabbos has another shear. Imla Netiya Shtayim, if you plan to plant these pits, to grow trees from them, so then all you need is 2. Im la'achila kimlo pi chazir. If it's for food, meaning that obviously humans don't consume date pits, but if you want to give it to an animal, typically you'd feed these to pigs. Pigs would eat date pits. So all you need is enough to fill the mouth of a pig. V'kama malo pi chazir echas. And how much is that? All you need is 1 date pit. Tosfos makes a point of saying that we're not suggesting that a Jew can own a pig, right? But your neighbor, your non-Jewish neighbor, might have a pig named Arnold, and you may want to give your neighbor the pits. So you carry it out to give to your non-Jewish neighbor, all you need to carry is one in order to be chayiv. In lahasik, if, however, you're carrying it in order to, because your intention is to use these things for fuel for a fire, so then kedei lavashel beit sekala. Then you need enough pits to be able to cook an easily cooked egg, which Rashi explained before was a chicken's egg. Then that's the amount that you would need. And im lecheshbon shtayim. If your purpose of preserving these pits and carrying them around is to use them as markers, people would use markers or chips to be able to count things when they would be working with inventory and things like that. So you need to carry out 2. And others say no, you need to carry out 5. Well, Rashi explains, if it's less than 5, you're not going to use markers. You'll be able to remember in your head. Tana Rabbana. Brisa continues and says, "Hamotzi shnei nimin mizanav hasus mizanav hapara chayev shematzniyan osan lenishbin." That if a person carries on Shabbos 2 hairs from a horse's tail or from a cow's tail, he's chayev because they have chashivas, because people store these things in order to be able to create these very fine nets to trap birds. Miksha shel chazir echas. If you have, there's apparently, according to Rashi, there's very prickly, very coarse and thick hairs that grow on the back of a pig, and you would typically use these things to be able to use as saddle thread, to sew up. They're very durable, and you use them to help you make saddles. And so therefore, all you need is one of those hairs because it has chashivas, and therefore you're going to store it away. And surei dekel shtayim. If you have the fronds from a palm tree, all you need to carry is 2, these leaves, because you'd use them as wicker to make baskets with. And torei dekel echas, and if you have the soft, silky bark from a young tree, so then you would only need 1 piece of this bark in order to be chayiv. And Rashi says, I'm not really sure what it's used for, but the Aruch says you use it to sew up the mouth of a gourd. I'm not really sure exactly how that applies. Maybe it's when you're cooking it or something. But anyway, it also has chashivas. Tziporis krumim ben chay ben mesa kolshu. So if you have this kind of grasshopper called the tziporis krumim, whether it's alive or dead, since it's used for medicinal purposes, all you need is a kolshu. So the first question is, what kind of creature is this? Maitziporis krumim. So Amar Rav says, Pilya bi'ari. That's what it was known as in Rav's in Bavel. That explains it. Amar Abaya u'mishtakach bedikla dechad navara. Abaya says that where you can find this grasshopper is if you go to a young palm tree that hasn't yet developed enough, only has 1 ring of the tree. It's a very, very young sapling. This kind of grasshopper hangs around that tree. And va'avdi lo lechuchma. What kind of medicinal use does it have? Before people had Ritalin, they would use this grasshopper as a way of giving people wisdom, of heightening their intellect. And how does it work? This seems to be some kind of supernatural effect that it has. Don't ask me to explain it. Lapalga diyamina upalga dismole ramila begufsa dinachsha. That what you would do is you would kill the grasshopper, let it die, eat the right half of the grasshopper, and then take the left half of the grasshopper and put it in a copper tube or container, and then seal it up with 60 seals. Rashi says not specifically 60, but in order to seal it off really, really well. Vitali la be'ivra dismala, and then suspend it on your left arm. The simonech, and the way to remember that is leiv chacham liyaminu v'leiv chsil l'smala. Pasuk says that the heart of the wise man is on his right side, the heart of the fool is on his left side, and because this person or this child needs to develop their wisdom, they're considered a fool presently, and therefore they have to put the tube with the grasshopper left part of its body on his left side in order to improve his wisdom. And then this would be used as a way of improving or heightening a person's intellect. He'll become as wise as he wants. He'll be able to learn whatever he wants. And then at the conclusion of his heightened, accelerated intellect, Then, once he's been able to cram for his exams, for his finals, or whatever it is, he then should break open the copper container and eat the left part of the grasshopper that was previously suspended on his arm. The ilo miyakar tamul, because if he doesn't eat it, all of his newly gained knowledge will dissipate. He'll lose it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Af Hamotzi Chule. Rabbi Yehuda then had added to our Mishnah, and he said that I hold that even if you bring home for your kid a non-kosher species of grasshopper, as long as it's alive, then all you need is a shear of a kolshu. But Tanakama Savar Lo. The Tanakama says no. A person is not going to take a non-kosher species of grasshopper to bring home for his kid to play with. Why? My time Dilma Achule. Because the father's going to be worried that his son will eat the grasshopper. Doesn't want his kid to eat I can't give your kid a non-kosher grasshopper to eat. So the Gemara says, if that's the concern, then you shouldn't be allowed to bring home a kosher grasshopper for your kid either. Because if you're worried he's going to eat it while it's alive, then even a kosher grasshopper you're not allowed to eat. It's not kosher. Why? Because the harav kahana v'koim kamei derav v'hakama aver shushiva apume. Once Rav Kahana was standing in front of Rav, and he was passing a living grasshopper near his mouth. And Omerlei Shakle de Lolemru Mechol Kalchale v'Kaber Mishum Bal Tishaksus Nafsho Seichem. And Rav admonished him and said, "Listen, move that thing away from your mouth, because if people see you, they're going to think that you're violating the law of Bal Tishaksu." There's a prohibition that even when there's no din of Aver Minachai, let's say, because this is an animal that doesn't need shchita, but there's still an isser of Bal Tishaksu, that you're not allowed to do anything that is disgusting to normal human beings. Eating a live creature is an isser of Bal Tishaksu. Do not do that which is disgusting. And therefore don't pass this living grasshopper in front of you because it looks like you're about to eat it while it's alive. And that would be a biblical prohibition. So if you're worried about your child eating a non-kosher grasshopper, eating a kosher grasshopper is prohibited if you're worried he's going to eat it while it's alive. So eladilma mayis va'achile. So the answer is no. You're worried that you'll bring home a living grasshopper, it'll die, and your kid will go ahead and eat it. So the Tanakama says, you're not going to bring home a non-kosher species of grasshopper, because if you're worried it'll die and then your kid will eat it, that's not a good thing, right? So therefore you're not going to use it as a pet. You're not going to use a non-kosher grasshopper as a pet. You'll only use a kosher grasshopper as a pet. So the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says no. Imayis katan mispat sapidlai. It's amusing, but he basically says that when it comes to children, if you give him a pet and he names it Tommy or Jiminy Cricket or whatever he calls it, he's going to become emotionally attached to it. And when the pet dies, he's not going to eat it. So therefore, even if you bring him home a non-kosher species, you don't have to worry that the kid's going to eat it. And therefore, you will be liable for carrying it, even a kosher, because it has chashivas as being potentially a child's pet. And he'll give it a burial at sea and flush it down the toilet before he'll eat it, So, what?
Or in the backyard.
Or in the backyard, that's right. Have a whole ceremony that kids do within the shoebox and the da-da-da. All right. Anyway, Hadron Alacham Rabbi Akiva, we'll come back to you. Now, the next parak really is a full continuation of the subject material that we've been learning. So I'm not really sure why Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi chose to end the parak here, because really this is just a continuation of things that you carry on Shabbos and what their shiurim are, what their measurements are. So let's go on. Hamatzniya lezera uledugma v'lerefua, that if a person puts into safekeeping anything that is meant for planting or for a sample. When we talk about a sample, what we mean is a merchant who typically carries a swatch of fabric or something like that, even though normally a small piece of fabric that can't be used for clothing you're not going to be liable for. But if you're using it as a sample because you're a merchant, and that's been your mental designation of the item, so then it has chashivas when it's smaller than the normal requisite size. And similarly, if you have something that you've kept for safekeeping for curative purposes, so then v'hotzio b'Shabbos chayiv b'chol shu. If you carry those things on Shabbos, then you're going to be chayiv even for a minimal amount. V'chol adam ein chayiv alav ela kishiuro. But another person who would carry those items that you've set aside for zera for dugma or for refuah, since the other person did not have that mental designation of those items, he'd have to carry the requisite shiurim that were already detailed in the previous last two prakim in order for him to be chayiv. So, chazar v'hichniso eno chayiv ela kishiura. Now, let's say you carried one of these items that had been used for zera, dugma, or refuah, meaning that you had given it its chashivas, and then you carried it outside, so you're fine, you're liable. Now, let's say you change your mind. I took out a seed, and my plan was to plant it, right? And then I changed my mind, and I'm going to bring it back inside. I'm not going to use it for planting anymore. So the halacha, therefore, is that it reverts back to no longer having chashivas. And therefore, if I bring it back inside, once I change my mind, I won't be chayiv unless it has the requisite shear for seeds. Okay, now the Gemara now says, Lama le lemisni hamatzniya, lisni hamotzi lezeru, v'ledugma lerefuah, chayiv b'cholshu. So first the Gemara questions the language. It's an unusual language, hamatzniya. You put something in safekeeping. Why not just get to the point and say that if you carry these objects outside and you had mentally designated them for these purposes, then you're going to be chai for their chashivas? Why do you have to talk about the history that you put them away for safekeeping initially? So Amar Abaye hacha b'may askinan kigon shehitzniyo v'shachach lama hitzniyo v'hashta kamafik leistama. So the chiddush is over here that our Mishnah is really talking about a more detailed case. What happened was you had put these items away for safekeeping with the mental designation of chashivas for these items. Then you forgot about them. You find them in the drawer one day and you pull them out and you decide to carry them outside on Shabbos. So mahu detema batli batla machshavto. So you might think that since you don't remember anymore having mentally designated these things with importance, therefore you're not going to be liable. But kamash malan kol ha'osel das rishana hu osa. Therefore, the chiddush of our Mishnah is that since you never actively de-designated them or undesignated them or removed their chashivas, since you never actively did that, they retain their initial chashivas that you had originally designated them, even when you no longer remember that you had done that. That's the chiddush of the Mishnah.
So the default is chashivas rather than...
The default is whatever you had originally designated them. So we're just going to go to the two dots since we began so much in the middle of the Yomid. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Mechayev Hoya Rabbi Meir Af B'Motzichi Te'echas L'Zriya. That according to Rabbi Meir, if as long as you mentally designated even one wheat kernel for planting, if you carry it on Shabbos, you're going to be liable. So the Gemara says Pshita Kol Shut's not. That should be. What are you adding? The Mishnah says that, and it's not Mishnah to Rav Meir. Usually, and Rav Meir is usually in accord with an anonymous Mishnah. So why would we think that it would be any different? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. No, maybe the words kol shehu that are used by our Mishnah doesn't literally mean a small, tiny amount like one little kernel of wheat. Maybe all it means to say is that you don't need the full amount of a dried fig, but maybe you need a kazayas at least. And therefore the chiddush is that kol shehu literally means kol shehu. It could even mean one little tiny wheat kernel to be enough to make you liable. That's the chiddush of Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Now, Maskef la Rav Yitzchak Bereda Rav Yehuda Elameata. So Rav Yitzchak Bereda Rav Yehuda asks a conceptual question. He's saying, based upon what we've just learned in our Mishnah, everything when it comes to carrying depends upon one's mental designation of the item's chashivas. So his argument is going to be based on the premise that just like you can add chashivas to something, you can demote something's chashivas based upon your mental designation. So therefore, chishiv lahutzi kol beiso hachanami delomichai v'adamafik l'kulei. So what if a person has in mind, he says, you know what? I'm going to carry the contents of my entire house, right? And then I'm going to carry it in one fell swoop. Carry the sofa, the dining set, the big screen TV, carry it out on my back in one fell swoop. Let's say he changes his mind. Let's say he's unable to carry all of it out and only carries out the sofa instead of carrying out the dining set and the big screen TV. Are you going to tell me because mentally he initially had designated the chashivus of this package that he was going to be carrying out as one thing, and now he's broken into multiple components, so no longer has chashivus, he's not going to be liable? So Hassan but ladaito esel kol adam. So the Gemara says no. When we talk about a person's mental designation, A mental designation only works to upgrade something's chashivas, an item's chashivas. But to downgrade an item's chashivas when the rest of the world have already designated chashivas to a sofa, his mental state cannot remove that which is chashiv to the rest of the world. So therefore, if everyone else holds its chashiv, then his das is batal, his intent, his mental designation is meaningless. It's null and void vis-a-vis the rest of the world's mental designation. What he is able to do is to upgrade something's chashivas, even when it's not chashiv to the rest of the world, and that's what our Mishnah is dealing with. All right, we'll hold it here for today. Have a wonderful day. Good to be back.
Good to have you back, Rabbi.
Thanks.